Well, good morning, Benjamin Hadfield, technical dive instructor in Idaho. Yes, there's technical diving in Idaho. People ask me that all the time. Where do you go? Well, we go deep in lakes, 130, 150, 180 feet in a lake where it gets down to 38 degrees. So that does happen. So it's a really meaningful thing. But bringing you masses, we've got a really special guest today. I'm really excited to bring on Michael. Michael's got a really amazing amount of experience, been a writer for a long time for Dan Europe. He's done just an amazing amount of stuff within the diving community and just a real treat to bring onto a show like this. As you all know, I started this channel because I was interested in the information. I was hoping other people would be interested in it as well. And what I'm finding is you like this kind of stuff. So you like hearing from amazing guys like Michael, who's just got an amazing story, got some cool stuff he's going to teach us today as well. Michael, thanks for coming on today.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me. Yeah, always happy to talk about diving.
I know, right? We should we should have two jars in our living room. One that says for a nickel for every time we curse that never gets filled, and a nickel for every time we talk about diving without being asked, and we'd be able to pay for our vacations.
Right, indeed.
Well, Michael, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you became involved with diving and particularly dive safety?
Yeah, so I started diving. Well, I grew up thinking about diving, watching Jacques Cousteau, reading his books, Sea Hunt, like many of us. But I didn't, and I was a swimmer, breathhold diver, but never started diving until I came out to California to go to grad school in Northern California. So I got certified there, and just I don't know. I still remember my first breath on the regulator. It was like, wow. And so I got hooked. I mean, that was a long time ago. I'm not going to say how long, but it's many decades. And and my writing career kind of started around the same time. When I was in graduate school, I went in the computer industry, and I just had a bug to start writing. And my first three stories actually were diving stories. I got involved in some adventures. And actually, this led me to start my magazine, aquaCORPS, Journal of Technical Diving, and kind of continue from there. But I got involved with a group doing these deep dives. They were 150, 160-foot dives, decompression dives, obviously, kind of outside the limits. At the time, this was in the late 80s. You know, you weren't supposed to go below 130 feet. You were never supposed to do a decompression dive, and people only dived there, of course. Didn't even have decompression gas. So that got me involved and got me excited that I discovered there were all these groups sort of secretly in the closet doing deep diving. In the East Coast, the wreck divers, the Andrea Doria people, etc., certainly in the cave community. And I was just hungry for information. There was none, so I ended up deciding to start a magazine called aquaCORPS, which was the original tech diving magazine. And actually, I ended up coining the term technical diving. We need something to call this new thing that was happening, which was really about mixed gas technology. Anyway, and so that got me started, and I've been writing and publishing magazines ever since. So and working with different clients.
That's amazing. So, and that definitely unfortunately dates you a bit because I know when mixed gases started coming in as well, and I've had that conversation a few times. And so before mixed gases and just air diving, and Sea Hunt, unfortunately, I was an indicator as well. That was such a great show, though. I still watch the old episodes once in a while. They're just, oh man,
yeah.
Guy.
With the struggle, they'd always have the cut air hose. That was always a big thing, and the big knives, you know.
Yeah, the ginormous knife. Absolutely, you got to have the ginormous. I'm going to kill everybody knife.
Good.
No, Michael is really? As the senior editor and writer for Dan Europe and the editor-in-chief for InDEPTH magazine at GUE. What do you consider the most pressing issue in dive safety today?
Wow. Well, good question. One, we just came out of having the Rebreather Forum 4. This was the fourth industry scientific symposium looking at rebreather technology. And what we discovered out of that is that rebreather diving is still a lot riskier than open circuit diving. And in fact, the estimates are that it's maybe 5-10 times the risk of dying on closed circuit than open circuit. Currently, we have 20 to 30 rebreather fatalities a month globally. about 10% of deaths. And rebreathers do not represent 10% of the scuba sets out there. It's probably less than 1%. So that's, I think, a pressing issue. We actually are having a meeting at DEMA, which is the dive industry trade show, annual trade show, next month, and meeting about this very issue. So, and it comes down to, and I think this is probably true in diving in general. Incidents come down to human factors. It's not the fact the equipment is breaking and that's causing problems. It's people forgetting or not analyzing their gas, not doing their checklists. It's those getting distracted. It's those sorts of issues that impact our safety. Yeah.
So pretty much the biggest concern or biggest factor in the fatalities that you're seeing is not following a checklist?
Well, that's certainly one of them. With regards to a rebreather, checklists are pretty essential because they're complex machines, and they you need to have everything lined up right to make them work right. So checklists are a big thing. Gas analysis is still a big thing, analyzing your gas, knowing what you're breathing. Yeah. So in rebreather diving, both of those are important factors. Yes.
Absolutely. So if more divers were able to get into that, these seem like pretty basic steps to me as well. I mean, as just an open water diver, I can see that there's a lot of guys that don't do that, or a lot of girls or people that don't do that. Mm-hmm. You start moving into technical diving, it seemed like that would be the kind of the basic idea. What's the gas I'm breathing? What have I put everything together? Have I measured my tanks before I get in the water? Have I done, simple basic things? And so that's your thing. That's the number one that is a human factor.
Yeah, a checklist is a great way to start every dive. Going through again your equipment, your gases, very very important to start where everything's right to begin with. Yeah, that's important, I think.
Wow.
Another issue I think is team diving versus solo diving. Now, I don't know so much on the recreational side, but on the technical side, and certainly in rebreather diving, though many people solo dive, your risk goes up substantially. If you can't, particularly on the rebreather, which is more complex, we're breathing an artificial atmosphere. Sure. Open circuit's pretty easy. If you analyze your gas and you got the regulator in your mouth, you know what you're breathing. But that's not the case necessarily in a rebreather, which is a dynamic gas mix. So, yeah.
Sure, absolutely. Making sure your O2 sensors are in line and well serviced, clean, ready to go. Little things, checking your set point on your computer is definitely would be a big key. But
and having a team, having someone to dive with. So that was my point. That solo diving can be done, but certainly if you have another partner who's attentive and not just a same oceans, same buddy, same ocean diver, but someone who's paying attention and you're together as a team, I think that greatly improves your odds of safety, because there's two brains, two sets of hands. That's two sets of eyes versus one. Yeah.
Well, let's jump into the team diving for a second. I like that idea. So as we go through and you start looking at accidents worldwide, and you're very in tune with that, how many of these accidents worldwide would you say could be avoided by simply going into the team diving environment, not same ocean, same dive?
Yeah, it's a really hard question to answer, and particularly because we have a data challenged industry. Sure. I came out of the computer industry, and there's data for everything, all shipments, market share, everything. How many computers are out there in diving? We don't even know how many tech divers there are. How many active divers there are at any time. We have estimates, but so it's hard to measure some of these things. But I know, again, not to focus so much on rebreathers, but it's fresh in my mind. Sure. Probably about 40% of the fatalities are with solo divers. We just had several incidents in the last month. So if something goes wrong and you can't self-rescue and you're alone, then you're just going to die. So having a team is, you can't necessarily say that those people would have lived if they had a teammate, but certainly their odds would have improved, right?
Absolutely. And I mean,
So,
certainly
yeah,
moving into that level of diving, technical diving, mixed gas, working to trimix and whatnot as well, we're adding a level of complexity that's certainly well
absolutely.
above the average. I mean, if we were to look at it in racing terms, this would be the Indy 500 kind of deal. We're at that level of the game, and the tolerances for failure are much, much less. So
That's
I
right.
can see that for sure. Absolutely. And
I mean, the big difference. Oh,
Go ahead.
I mean, the big difference in a tech dive, you can't go right to the surface generally, right? That's the big difference. It's an overhead environment, whether you're in a wreck, a cave, or you just have a decompression obligation, you can't go to the surface. So that adds a layer of complexity and a layer of seriousness that, as a diver, you got to deal with and plan for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like that. So looking back at current training for open water, where this all begins, what do you think's missing right now?
It's good question. It's there. There's a balance. We need divers. We want to grow our sport and share the love of water. So there's a tendency to want to make learning to dive easy, right? Jump in, you can quickly learn to dive. So on the one hand, on the other hand, we know as divers to really learn to dive and to be comfortable in the water takes a while. You can't really learn to dive in a weekend, right? You can get started, but it takes time. So I think in training there's a balance between, again, the quick courses and I think what happens for people like us who've been in it all these years, we obviously got the bug and got hooked and stayed. Those people will go through those very minor classes and stay and continue their education. But a lot of people drop out because, in a quick class like that, you really never learn to be comfortable in the water and master any skills. So on the other hand, there are courses, GUE has this, Global Underwater Explorers. They have an open water class that's 6 days. There's 10 pool sessions, 6 dives, and 40 hours of instruction. So at the end of a week like that, you come out with trim, some buoyancy skills, and more comfortable in the water. So I see that's the challenge, that juggling that, right? How easy to make. Don't make it too hard because then people won't do it. But if you make it too easy, people won't stay because they'll never really get into it. So I see that kind of the challenge, or one of the challenges of reaching out to get more divers. Yeah.
Right on. I like that though, and GUE has always been a little bit above in terms of safety margin than just about everywhere else as well. At least my opinion. That's my humble opinion, and I know it gets its rap about being semi-militaristic, but
Right.
they do it for a reason, right?
Right. Well, and it's the reason is because GUE is like the military community, like the commercial diving community, a standards-based diving system, right? So people have the same gear configurations. People have the same protocols. We do a pre-dive sequence. It's called that. The mnemonic is the EDGE, but it's basically a pre-dive checklist to go through your equipment, make sure everything's all right. We dive as a team. We have standard gases. Depending on what depths you're going to go, you have a gas. So everyone's on the same gas mix. So I think that on the one hand, that goes a long way for putting everyone on the same page, which makes things safer. If you're having a problem with your gear, I know what your gear is, so I can see it and help you, etc. So, but on the other hand, it gets people to make Borg jokes. Resistance is futile. So again, a balance, but GU has taken that approach, and I think it's been good. It works well. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and I've liked that. I've definitely read through the GUI materials and really enjoyed what I've seen so far. Just some of the instructors get a little intense for my taste. I'm former military, so I'm like, wait a minute, I got out of the military to get away from that. Not
it's true, and sometimes it's the new up and comers that are the most activist. as
Absolutely.
opposed to the old timers or yeah,
Sure.
exactly. So
Well, that's how it always is. It's always the newest evangelist that is determined to save your soul from the devil, right?
right. Divers are a passionate bunch, as you know. So.
That is absolutely true. So,
Yeah.
so Michael, so for those who are interested in entering into the world of technical diving, what steps should they take to adequately prepare and ensure their safety when transitioning from rec to tech?
Good, really good question. Yeah. Um, a starting point, a prerequisite, is to have good skills. That really helps. Good buoyancy is essential. Good trim in the water and propulsion. And then once you have your skills, it used to be in the old days there was a big gap between recreational and technical, and now there's more of a continuum of training. All the agencies have a path from recreational into tech. In the GUE world, we have a class called Fundamentals. It's a 4-day class. It's on building those, and improving those basic skills of trim and buoyancy and propulsion, all the steps. And then that leads into the tech programs from there. Other agencies have, again, starting with decompression procedures, gas mixes, etc. So I think the biggest thing is not to be in a rush. It's a process, it takes time, like learning to dive itself. And so it's a marathon, not a sprint. So people should take their time and get, do their classes and get their experience. Very important. The old idea of, the 10-day wonder where I take all the advanced, I'm a recreational diver. I spent 2 weeks taking classes and now, hey, I'm a tech diver. It doesn't really work that way. It's better to do a course, get some experience, do the next course, get some experience, etc., and build up. Because these days, you can go as far and as deep as you want to go. I mean, it just depends on how much training you want, how much you want to spend for technology, etc. So it's really a wide open field. Yeah.
That's awesome. And that's something that I think a lot of divers don't get is the idea that you don't become a tech diver overnight. It takes time to work that trim and get that good buoyancy to the point where you could just chill, right, do nothing and hang out. I like how Woody Altman
right.
says. He says, I teach my divers to do nothing and enjoy it. Right.
Right.
And more often. In fact, I had a young man, I had a 12-year-old in my open water class this weekend that we had the hardest time slowing down. And we'd start onto a dive and he'd have to reach over and grab his fin because he was just whoosh. It's like, no, that's not what it's about. You don't have to see the whole lake in one day. I promise you. And I think that mindset continues on through diving as they got to slow down. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Slow down, get those basic skills. It's so imperative. Absolutely. Yeah. So, Michael, as divers move into more advanced diving, what are some of the key classroom lessons that they should study and learn to ensure that they have a good handle on what's going to happen to them and what's going on with tech diving?
Ask that question again. I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
So as I get ready for tech diving, I've got the good idea of getting good balance, good trim, good fundamentals. What are some of the classroom ideas that I need to focus on to understand that will help me as I move into tech diving?
Classroom ideas, huh?
The academic.
The academic. Well, certainly being a tech diver requires a good knowledge of physiology. I mean, tech diving is really about mixed gas technology, right? Optimizing one's breathing gas to improve safety and performance. And typically that involves maximizing your oxygen within physiological limits to minimize the inert gas uptake. And then choosing a diluent or choosing a inert gas that has good effects. So if you're going deep, you don't want to be breathing nitrogen. It's narcotic and it's heavy. So tech divers switch to helium after about 100 feet. Start adding helium in your mix to reduce the work of breathing and also to reduce narcosis. So that bit of knowledge is very important. Certainly decompression theory, understanding the basics of decompression. That's another essential bit of knowledge that tech divers need to know about. Yeah.
I like that. And making sure it's really just a mixed gas technology course, a mixed gas physiology course. That's a
Yep,
really great
yep,
way to break it down to
exactly.
people.
Yeah.
That's
To,
awesome. So
under,
what,
to understand it. Yep. Important.
no, that's awesome. I think that's a key thing as well. I think it's all learnable, but understanding the interactions between. And I like that you broke it down to it's understanding mixed gas physiology. I think that's the best way
Yep.
I've heard to explain what you need to understand about the technology side of decompression diving. So,
Yep.
so when it does,
And with that, I mentioned helium, of course, and nitrogen, but CO2 also is very important to understand the impact of CO2, work of breathing. They relate as your gas density, as you go deeper and your gas density increases, you're more likely to retain CO2, which can, cause other problems with narcosis, with oxygen toxicity. So a good understanding is important. Yeah.
no, that's an excellent point to bring. I mean, I think a lot of times when we think about a rebreather accident where they took a CO2 hit, we immediately think they must have had a hole in their scrubber somewhere, and the SORB allowed a pathway for that to happen. But you're breathing that heavier gas, and absolutely, so you got CO2
Right.
retention already.
Right. I mean, it's a problem as you go deeper that the work of breathing, particularly the people that are doing we see it on these uber deep, the explorers that are doing 200-meter dive, 600, 700-foot dives. The gas is so dense that you can suffer from what's called respiratory insufficiency. Our ability to get rid of CO2 reduces as you go in depth just from the work of breathing. And so, in fact, there was a famous case of a guy named David Shaw who died at Bushman's Got Cave. And it's on video. He had a video camera, and you can hear he just cannot breathe enough. He starts to work, and that doesn't, and he dies basically. He can't breathe enough. So it's important to be aware of that and knowledgeable about that. Yeah.
I think we're all pretty familiar with the David Shaw case, and
Yeah.
I've seen the video. Dave's not coming home. That's a great video.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, in that case with the heavy work of breathing, what should he have done, or what could he have done to prevent that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, good question. I mean, and I don't remember exactly what mix he was doing. He was what caused him problems is he got caught in the line and he started working. And as he worked, his CO2 just went up. So talking to and in fact, in InDEPTH this month, I have an interview coming out in November with a guy, Xavier Minuscus, who's one of the deep French cave diver explorer, who's doing very deep dives, 800 and 900-foot dives. And at those depths, and talking to those people, you just can't work. You just have to remain chill. A story from Craig, the Wet Mules, Dr. Richard Harris and Craig Challam, Pierce Resurgence, talking to them recently as well. They were at like 240 meters. Craig dropped something and he just automatically went down to get it. And as soon as he started kicking, it was like a bong hit, the CO2 happening. So, yeah. Wow. So at those depths, you can't work hard. You have to be chill. Yeah.
I don't think any of us really think about that. I mean, most of us aren't going to go to the 300-meter range or the 200-meter range. So, no. I mean, that's definitely reserved for the very brave of heart and the 1/1000th of 1% of CCR divers that are out there. That's for sure.
It's true. Yes. That is important that they do it. We need, as a species, our job is to go where no one has gone before. We have to. Doesn't mean all of us have to do, but somebody does. So we need those people out at the edge of the envelope, pushing things for us. Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, I do appreciate all the Star Trek references in there. We're Trekkies in our home too.
Right.
So, Michael, when it does come to decompression safety, can you explain the most significant challenges or areas where there is a lot of room for improvement, and what steps can be taken to address those?
Good question. Certainly, a basic thing is with gradient factors. Most people are aware of gradient factors today, and having a fairly conservative set of gradient factors. If you don't use gradient factors, in other words, use a Buhlmann algorithm with 0, 100 as your low and high gradient factors, the risk of getting bent goes up a bit. So that's important to have conservative gradient factors that kind of fit with you. There are lots of materials and articles about that. People can read about it. That's one. And I think the second thing is just, again, it comes down to good skills. If you're doing decompression diving in, say, open water, you need to be able to manage your decompression, right? Shoot a bag and manage your decompression stops. So that's part of the skills you need. And that comes down to, again, buoyancy and trim, being able to hold your stops and move up. So those are I think the two basic things: having a good conservative factor, and then, having skills to be able to do your decompression, kind of match your table. Yeah. Match your computer.
So now, gradient factor is a good question. Do you use the same gradient factor from CCR to open circuit?
Good question. I do in general. Yeah, I do. Yeah, okay. I do. I use like
do you use? I'm curious.
I use like a 50-75. So the low gradient factor gets you off the bottom, right? If you have a 20 or something like that, you're going to be making deep stops and still on gassing. So a 50 gets you up off the bottom, fairly rapidly. And then on the top, spending more, the high gradient factor keeps you at basically your shallow stops, right? Your oxygen stops at 6 meters and at 6 meters and 3 meters. So yeah, so get off the bottom and spend more time, more time at your last stop. So that's what I use. We have a great article on this by David Dulett, who's one of the world's leading decompression experts, cave explorer, on gradient factors in InDEPTH, if people want to look it up, and what he uses and why. So yeah.
That's great, and make sure I'll make sure to put that link in the bio down below us as well.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So decompression safety is critical aspect of diving. Can you explain factors such as hydration and temperature and how those affect decompression process?
Yeah. So very interesting. So obviously decompression is about off gassing, right? We're taking on inert gas during our dive, and then decompression is letting out that off gassing in a controlled manner that prevents us from, causing bubbles to grow in our blood system. So why does temperature and hydration affect that? So think of the blood as kind of the conveyor belt, right? From moving gas, from the tissues out to the lungs as you're decompressing and as you're diving the other way. So if you're dehydrated, you're going to have less blood flow and therefore less conveyor belt to bring that gas from your tissues and put it into the lungs and back out, to off gas. So humidity controls that. And temperature also affects things, right, in the flow. When things are cold, your blood vessels constrict, and so you're going to get less blood flow. So there's a study going on right now at Dan Europe to look at optimizing both hydration and thermal. Both of these can go either way. I mean, if you have too much hydration, you just drink before you dive. That's not good because you're going to end up peeing it all out, etc. And if you're dehydrated, it's not good. Same with temperature. If you're, for example, it depends during the dive. Going down on the dive, if you're very warm, then everything's wide open. You have more blood flow, so you're going to take on more inert gas, right? If you're warm on the bottom. Conversely, if you're warm on the ascent, then again, everything is going to open up and you're going to off gas better. So this was actually discovered, the role of thermal during I think it was an airplane crash, and they had a team down working on the wreck, and they noticed they had people on hot water suits. So hot water suit is basically a wetsuit with hot water running through it. And so you're warm on the dive. And they noticed this group that were diving hot water suits had a slightly higher bends rate. They got bent during this recovery. Not a big deal for a commercial diver because they have chambers right there. But they noticed a slightly higher DCS incident, and that got them to investigate. So, and what they've discovered is just what I said. You basically want to be cold, not cold, but not warm during your descent and working portion of the dive, because that means less inert gas comes on board. And then you want to be warm on your decompression because that helps you to off gas. You don't want it the other way. If you're warm on descent and dive and then cold on the way up, you're going to have you're going to take on a lot of inert gas and you're not going to be able to get rid of it. So you're likely to get more likely to get bent. So optimizing those two things, hydration and thermal, is important. And as I said, there's a study right now in Europe to look at how one might, like a strategy for optimizing your physiology. Yeah, with those two factors. Yeah.
That's very interesting. And interestingly enough, I mean, we as tech divers, we go down, we hit that 210-foot mark on a wreck that we're really, really enjoying. And we've worked to get there. We're at 51 degrees, but it seems like you start running out of thermal comfort because hypothermia, it has a cumulative effect. You get to that point where you sweat or you get colder on your deco. So it seems like it's pretty common. I can't tell you how many deco stops I've started to get the shivers, and I'm like, okay, how do I turn up the heat a little bit?
Right. I mean, for really cold water, I mean, heat is kind of the way to go, right? Electric system. Again, you need to be careful. You don't want to be super warm during the dive. Put on your deco to crank up the heat a bit. That's kind of an optimal way to do it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Definitely.
You don't want to be cold on deco.
No. And oddly enough, I mean, well, not oddly enough, but commonly enough it happens. And nothing worse than having a 30 minutes in the ocean, sitting there and going and shivering and being cold, and for 30 minutes not being able to do anything about it.
Right. I mean, for deeper and longer dives, one of the things that's happening now are people are using habitats. This is obviously easier in a cave because you can, station it and position it and anchor it down. But people are using it in open water as well for certain kinds of dives, having a deco habitat to, again, get out of the water, get warm, particularly in very cold water. Warm water, you wouldn't need it. But yeah.
Now, have you used a habitat?
I haven't personally. I mean, I've seen them. I've been around them, but I haven't had a dive where I actually used a habitat. But
Gotcha.
They're becoming more prevalent. Again, we have a story on habitats in InDEPTH written by Andy Pitkin, who's one of the lead divers with Karst Underwater Research. This is the group that we sadly lost. Brett Hemphill was one of the founders of Kerr, and he just did not return from an exploration dive in Texas.
That was very recent. That was very sad. That's for sure.
Yeah,
I think it affected a lot of us. That's for who knew him. That's for sure.
Yeah, he's just a remarkable guy and an extraordinary explorer who's been at it for decades. Yeah.
He was definitely going where no man had gone before, kind of deal. That's for sure.
Yes,
7,500.
They were down at Yeah, exactly. At depths of about, I think they're at 570 feet in this cave. It's the deepest cave in North America, actually.
Wow. That is unbelievable. The type of diving. I mean, just the fact that they had to go 7,500 feet into the cave to get where they were at, plus the depth, is just, that's some.
And these are 14-hour dives. So significant, and they have that. They need the habitat just to be able to get out of the water, take their mouthpiece out, get warm, talk, eat, hydrate.
Well, that was one of the interesting things in watching the Dave Not Coming Home is his dive buddy had gotten to the point on the 12-hour deco that he was so exhausted and so bent at that point that he didn't have the muscle ability to actually cause inhalation. So he'd slow down to 4 to 5 breaths per minute, and he was actually doing a manual purge to help him with work of breathing. So
amazing, huh?
Yeah. I don't think people realize how physically demanding this is.
Yeah,
or can be, or take the physical fitness portion into accommodation with this.
Yeah, we were talking about safety. That just physical fitness is a big important thing. Getting a cardio exam if you're over 40 or 50 regularly, etc. because about, I think 30 plus 30 to 40% of fatalities are medical related, right? You have a heart attack or a stroke or something underwater. So fitness is very important, and particularly in tech diving where you tend to have a lot of equipment, right? It's not just a single tank. You have 4 tanks or 6 tanks or, a lot of equipment to move through the water, scooters, etc. Yeah.
And unfortunately, they don't put the 210-foot mark right next to the place where you can park.
Right. Exactly.
I'm waiting for that to find that dive site where I can back my truck up right to it. I can literally pull the tank out and set it right in the water, right next to the water, and pull it in and just direct descent. But I haven't found that site yet.
Right.
I'm hopeful.
Right. Yeah.
No, you bring up an interesting point, and Dan US came up with 58% for year before last that were cardiac related. That 58% of dive maladies had a cardiac related event.
Oh wow.
It's absolutely crazy. That actually startled my wife enough that she came to me. She says we should order an AED for our field medical kit. And I said, okay, so we got, not only do we carry Pure O and everything else, but we carry an AED charged in our Save a Dive and Save a Dive kit as well. Which it's not a common thing, but I'm thankful to have it and pray I never have to use it. So
yeah, exactly.
So, Michael, as we got to talk about decompression models and algorithms, they've evolved over the years. What are some promising new developments that you're seeing and advancements in this field? And how you think they're going to impact safety and decision-making processes for divers?
Well, the kind of holy grail, which has been for a long time, is the idea of individualized decompression, right? That my schedule will relate to my physiology and me, versus your schedule. Mm-hmm. We're not there yet. It's a goal. People are looking at things like ways to measure decompression stress, right? That then you can adjust during the dive. So that's the big thing, in-dive monitoring, which is now starting to happen. We're getting new tools. I know Dan Europe has their product Dana, which is a in-water diver monitor that then can send a signal to the surface with ultrasound, and so the divers can be watched. But we're not there yet. The trick is finding a measure that can measure decompression stress. So you can say, at this point in the dive, you have a lot of decompression stress, you should do something more conservative or not. Right now, the candidates, heart rate variability is one candidate people are looking at. VGE, venous gas emboli, you can measure Doppler in the water. However, right now, there's not, even though we can measure those things, we haven't found the proper correlations to be able to measure decompression and stress in a reliable way. VGE, for example, yes, statistically we can, take Doppler after dives and measure things, but you can't use, how do I want to say this? It's a problem of variability. It's kind of like narcosis and toxicity. On a given day, you can do the same dive every day, and some days you have lots of bubbles, some days maybe you have no bubbles, and they may never turn into decompression sickness. So it's hard to know on an individual basis to use VGE to predict your decompression stress. So that's where things are stuck right now, just on measurement and data. We need more data. The good news is that now having these monitoring devices, which we use on land, right? Everyone's got a running app in their phone or a heart monitor. Having these for divers are going to start generating data that then we can start looking at and finding correlations using AI and machine learning and stuff. So we're in that's the phase we're in now. And it's, again, we don't have the answers yet, but we're on the way to getting there. So, yeah.
That's interesting. And it's something I've kind of wondered about for a while. I do know I wear the Garmin for a lot of easy tech dives where I can actually let it touch my skin or in a thinner wetsuit. Uh-huh. And it's interesting to go back and watch the heart rate portion of that and start making an idea. I wonder how that's affecting my diver stress. And I wonder how that's affecting my off-gassing portion of this as well. And looking at that. And then we have, O-Dive's got their product out as well. But it's definitely interesting to be able to figure a way to do this in dive as well. That'll be fun.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's really the next phase, diver monitoring, both of heart and everything else. Yeah, and as well as gases too, being able to monitor what you're monitoring your CO2 breathing. That's an important step that we're working on right now.
I think it'd be interesting to kind of look at as how we start building these studies as well, and the privacy factors and the liabilities of building these studies as well. And who we ask and how we ask the divers, would you like to be a part of the study? We're trying to figure out how to make sure you don't get bent, or to see what point you do get bent. So can you talk about?
Yeah, because we have these databases. Yeah, databases from the computer. I know Dan Europe has a database, I think, of about 50,000 dives now. So they have it set up so you can, at the end of the dive, basically upload your computer, your Shearwater or Garmin or whatever to their cloud with their data. And I think Shearwater and other computer manufacturers are working on that as well, right? Because they have your data in a cloud. It's anonymous, but we can, look at diving overall and diving safety using this data. Again, we need data to make any sort of scientific or evidence-based decisions. We need data. So that's the phase we're working in now. ODive is another example. Your post-dive monitoring, you create a database of that, and over time you can start to understand your physiology better. What
Absolutely.
Works and what doesn't. Yeah.
Well, Michael, this is an amazing interview, and I'd like to break this into two parts, if you wouldn't mind terribly, and pick this up again later on. Would that work for you?
Sure would. Yep.
Michael, I appreciate your time here. Guys, Benjamin Hadfield, Teach Me to Dive. Michael is a wealth of amazing knowledge, and there's so much knowledge that we need to break this into two parts. So we'll be back with a part 2 after this. Now, remember, if you like this kind of content, subscribe to our channel, hit the bell notifications to get the notifications, all that fun stuff, because you don't want to miss a second of the oceanic goodness we have in store for you. Michael, thanks for being here today.
Thanks so much, Benjamin.